Okpayemi Oguntade is an economic research analyst with the Financial Derivatives Company Limited, and she joins me in the studio to take a look at how commodities prices are faring in the markets, going by continuous rise in prices locally, and how much importers are bringing in for those who still import what we don't produce locally. Okpayemi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've seen that the prices have not changed much. Anything different from what we had 2 days ago?
No, the prices are still the same from 2 days ago, but what we know is on Tuesday, the prices of some certain commodities increased, rice and sugar, like I mentioned on Tuesday. But since Tuesday, prices have remained fairly flat. And, you know, looking at the NOI polls that was conducted yesterday, a lot of Nigerians are complaining about the recent hike in prices. About 97% of correspondents agreed that it has negatively affected their economic well-being, coming from the increase in the prices of goods and services, as well as electricity tariffs, as well as energy costs, that's fuel costs. So what we're seeing is there's a lot of, even though the prices are flat right now, the prices are still significantly high. I mean, at 19,000, just to put it in perspective for you, the minimum wage in Nigeria is 18,500, and a bag of rice is going for about 19,000. So essentially, if an individual that is paid based on the minimum wage wants to get a bag of rice, probably going to have to borrow an extra 500 naira to be able to afford the bag of rice. And taking it a little bit further, looking at the the court members, their allowance is about 19,800. This is a significantly high price for a bag of rice.
For Nigerians, and
yes.
Perhaps for those who want to eat rice, you could buy a half bag of the rice or a quarter bag.
You could, but at the end of the day, it's still very, very
it's still very
expensive
high.
at this point.
But how much of adjustments have we made as Nigerians? Based on your findings, have we adjusted to this? Some people are finding it difficult to adjust to the realities. You cannot imagine going to buy a bag of rice of 19,000 naira, going to also buy other condiments, because you wouldn't eat the raw rice. You have to buy the gas. That's another thing entirely. You have to buy the pepper.
Yes.
The palm oil, vegetable oil, or palm oil, as the case may be. So how much of adjustments have we made in this respect?
Well, at the end of the day, if you're looking at a commodity like rice is more like a necessity, and with necessity, it's what we tend to have is an inelastic demand for that good. So even if there's an increase in the price of that good, what you see is that the demand is still fairly the same. But what we've observed based on the NOI polls, what we've observed among Nigerians is they've tried to reduce their expenditure on luxury goods, or try to switch from premium products to cheaper varieties instead of buying. It could go for even your basic snacks, gum, even as well as your things you do for fun. You try to cut them down, cut down expenditure in those areas to make up for the increase in the prices of goods that you consume every other day. What
about the appetite for imported goods? That seems to have also dropped.
Yeah, at the end of the day,
to
some extent, because the marginal propensity to import in Nigeria is very high, and Nigerians have a huge preference for imported commodities. But what we see in the market is a few people are trying to adjust towards cheaper local commodities. But even at that, if you look at what's going on in the market, when you have the switch towards a substitute, you're essentially increasing demand of that substitute. So if you have an increase in demand, it's necessary to just follow that the price of that commodity as well would increase. So even if Nigerians are trying to adjust by switching to cheaper commodities, it's only a matter of time before those commodities become expensive as well.
But when we look at the environment in which our local industries operate, do you think that we can maintain a relatively stable, low prices for our commodities within the short to medium term if we have the environment to make these businesses thrive?
Well, that's another thing to look at, is if we're looking at how to make these businesses thrive, it's something that takes a while. It's more of a long-term procedure. Looking at the short to medium term, prices are likely to remain high. I'm looking at inflation figures from last month at 16.5. Going forward, it's likely to maintain the double digits range and maintain its upward trend. So in the short to medium term, it's not looking too good in terms of prices. Also, your exchange rate, the exchange rate depreciated yesterday to 317, even though we're seeing an appreciation in the parallel markets to 394. It's still very high at the interbank market. It depreciated to as low as 351 naira in the interbank market, and we know that Nigeria imports a lot of commodities, and so even for the locally produced commodities like sugar, we still have to import the raw sugar to refine it here in Nigeria.
Now, the Nigerian Meteorological Agency has said that we should expect flooding in some parts of the country. What impact do you think this would have on farmers in the country?
It will certainly affect the yield of certain commodities that are not, are kind of susceptible to flooding, or are not compatible with excess waterlogs in the farming area. So this would definitely reduce the yield on those products. And obviously, if you have a lower supply, you would have an increase in prices as well. But there are some certain commodities that can still survive despite flooding in those areas.
Okay, so what's your outlook for the markets in general?
Going forward, we expect prices to still remain at these high levels. We haven't gotten any indication that prices would come down anytime soon, because supply is still pretty much the same. Exchange rate isn't appreciating, it's depreciating, and so going forward, prices are likely to maintain the upward trend.
Thank you so much. Okpayemi Ogunta, the economic research analyst with the Financial Derivatives Company.
Thank you for having me.